Hey everyone, in today's video I want to go over how I use batch work for efficient production and really how I learned to make money with knife making. Today's a really good day for this video because I have two batches that are overlapping that I want to get done this week. I have a batch of paring knives that just need handles and finishing, and then a batch of nakiris that were just annealed and need to go through a lot of the process. So I'll go over what I do today, finishing the paring knives, and then getting the nakiris to their next step where I'll take them tomorrow. Now this is all the stuff I'm working on today. I have these 4 paring knife blades that are all finished. They just need their final sharpening after I put the handle on. But I'm putting these maple handles on. I am doing either walnut or maple for these, but I did an Instagram poll on my stories and everyone voted for, well, not everyone, but the majority voted for the maple handle. So on this first batch of paring knives going on my website, I'm doing these maple handles. And for these nakiris, they need cold forging, straightening, and then put them in the kiln. I need to get the kiln hot now, so it'll be ready after the straightening and after I do the handles, because the kiln takes about an hour to heat up. This shop is a shared space, so I always like to make sure there's nothing in the kiln so I don't ruin someone's anneal or heat treat if they're just tempered it in the kiln. So I always check to make sure before I take it out. Now I'll set the temperature. Now this video will have a lot more talking in it than normal because this plays a really important part of my story and really how I started knife making and got into this full time. I've been doing knife making for a little over 6 years now. I started back in high school just on my own, picked out some basic tools after I worked a summer and had a little bit of money to spend. After doing knife making on my own for a little bit, I apprenticed here at the shop I'm currently renting space out of with Chris Green, and I learned a lot doing that, and I did that through high school. After high school, I worked regular jobs, trades jobs, doing random stuff for a year, but eventually I stopped doing that because of a lot of chronic health problems I was running into. And I just was missing too much work. I couldn't safely drive a lot of the time. So I kind of got forced into full-time knife making before I was really ready for it. I've been a full-time knife maker for a little over 2 years now. And when I started, I had to figure out how to make money because I lost my previous job and I wasn't doing anything for a while. And I still was dealing with a lot of health issues and I didn't think I would be able to hold a regular job schedule. So over the time that I've been doing my knife making and apprenticeship with Chris Green, there's a knife store retailer here called Knifeware, and I would take my knives, whenever I finished a new knife, I would take it by them and talk to them. And that happened over the course of 4 years of my starting knife making. And eventually, my knife making got to the point where they wanted to have a few of them in store for their garage sale. I learned a lot from that first batch. It was only 3 knives. But for my first few batches I did with Knifeware, because of how inefficient I was with my batch work, I only made hourly like 6 Canadian dollars an hour, which is not a lot, and I did not have consistent work. So after that, a lot of my focus went into refining my forging process to make better knives and to do them a lot more efficiently. So that plays into a lot today of how I'm layering these 2 batches on top of each other so I can get more done in one day, because there's a lot of downtime with knife making. Like, I'm gonna cold forge straighten these. It's mainly straightening. I don't do a real lot of true cold forging while the kiln's heating up. And then once these are straightened, there'll still be a while on the kiln, so I'll move over back to the paring knives, get those handles made, and then heat treat these. Once they're in the temper, I'll probably go for a lunch break, come back and get the initial grinds on them done. I don't know if I can talk very well while I'm straightening this out, if you guys can hear, but I'll try to make it an interesting video so you can hear my story while also seeing the work I'm doing. It'd probably be easier to do that with a voiceover, but the last video voiceover took me like 3 or 4 hours to finish, and I don't want to do that again today. I'll do it for the next full build video, but maybe not for today. When your steels are very hardenable, it's very important to do this step fully annealed. So I heat it up in the kiln and then let it slow cool from a little under 800 degrees down to I went down to 550 and then let it air cool, but it's very important to have these fully annealed so you don't crack them during this stage. And it's very important to get these really, really straight in this stage so you don't have to deal with warps after you quench. Also make sure your blade is flat. That's something that's difficult, is if you make this straight and this straight, but you have a cup in your blade, that's gonna cause a lot of issues because it's not a straight blade. And during the quench, that can get even worse and do all sorts of weird things. So make sure this is flat this way and straight this way. This video is really more about the process and the story. So I'm just gonna be showing little clips of what I'm doing and how I'm structuring things more efficiently rather than long forging clips, because I also don't want to do the voiceover today. Throughout my knife making journey, I did all sorts of different sizes of batches. My first one I did for knifeware was 3 knives, and the biggest order I did for them was 26. And in that, I found kind of a balance. Now, big batches suck. You're doing repetitive things for hours and hours and hours. One task that takes you 10 minutes per blade, when you're doing 26 of them, that's a lot of minutes doing one small task. Now, I found over time my favorite size batch to do is 4 knives. Now that could change if my equipment changed, because I have the limitation of I'm forging all of these by hand, and I can only forge so many in a day. If you're doing a batch, you don't want to be forging for too many days. You'll slow things down because it's more efficient to do things and then heat treat and move on. So if you can forge a lot of knives in one day, then you can do a pretty big batch, or 2 days. But otherwise, I'd say for me, I like to stick my batch size to what I can forge in 1 to 2 days. For my recent forging, I've been doing usually 2. If it's gyudos or nikiris, I'll forge 2 fully in a day. I could do 4. I've done 4 before. I've done up to 6 before. That's too much. My arm gets too tired. I start getting too sloppy. But if I really want to have clean, nice, even forging, 2 a day is my good spot. Now, if I had a power hammer, I would be able to forge more of them in a day and increase my batch sizes and efficiency a lot. But I don't yet. That is on the list. But for now, hand forging batches of 4 to 6 is probably where I'll stay. Now, you will notice there is a press in this shop, and I do use it. I use it for doing Damascus or sandmine stuff for laminating, but it just isn't very useful for my knife forging because it's slow and the dies suck out a lot of heat. So I'm forging my blades very, very thin, and that just causes a lot of issues, cracks and stresses that I don't want to deal with. So hand forging is just the way to go in my current situation. Now that these are straight, I'll set them aside and start working on my paring knives, and then after that, time to heat treat them. Even if you perfectly straighten your knives after the anneal, there probably still will be a little bit of warping during the quench. Now, there's a way to mitigate that. I use aluminum plates after a short quench to finish cooling in there, and that helps keep it straighter. But there are also ways to straighten it out after with shim tempering or whatever. That I'll probably save another video. I'm not gonna go too in depth on the processes here because I mainly want to talk about efficiency and production and that kind of stuff. When I first started knife making, even a small, simple blade would take me a ridiculous amount of time. The first knives I made were mainly using hand files. I hand filed in the bevels, and that took forever. I don't know exactly why it took so long, probably just not using enough pressure or a cheap file, but just filing the bevels took 18 hours over 2 days, sitting in a garage and just filing bevels. As time has gone by, that has really, really increased, and now I can do a batch, depending on what the batch is, in like a batch in a week. Sometimes layering a batch is doable in a week, but usually I find somewhere between, for my gyudos, about 8 hours a blade, 8 hours a knife, maybe 6 to 8 hours a knife. Probably similar for the nikiris. Nikiris have a lot of drawing out too because of how wide and flat they are. Plus they're supposed to be very thin to cut through vegetables cleanly, so Those take a lot of forging too. A big efficiency step too is also just forging 2 knives at a time, because you can have 2 blades heating up, 1 blade heating up in the forge while you're forging the other one. And that just saves so much time when you're hand forging, because set your forge to like a temperature where you're not gonna overheat them, and you can just have one sitting in there while you're doing the heat, and then you just keep switching. Just always be forging. And that saves a lot of time, because you can forge 2 blades in just a little bit longer than it would take you to forge 1 blade if you're doing that. When you're making knives, every little step that you do, everything takes a little bit of time, and that all adds up. So if you're doing 1 knife at a time and you need to make a bunch of the same knife, all of these little things add so much time to your end product. Just like little things like when you need to change a belt, like that takes 15 seconds maybe. But if you have to do that 4 belt changes or more each knife, and you're doing that for 10 knives, everything like that adds up. It adds a lot of time to the end. So when you're doing a batch and you're doing a bunch of stuff at the same time, you have a lot less belt changes, because you can just do everything with the same belt. And then once all of the knives are ready for the next step, then you change the belt and move on to the next step. It saves so much time in the end. Even after you've spent a lot of time working on developing a consistent and good product, you're still probably going to run into the issue of no one knows who you are and no one's going to buy your product. So the way I went that is going through Knifeware, and I started selling my stuff through them first, because that would get me a little more recognition, because they're a reputable retailer. People know that they sell good stuff, so that helped people recognize my name and get my stuff out into the world, so more people had my knives and were using them. But something with retailers is you have to be prepared that they're gonna take a cut. So that makes your efficiency even more important, because you have to be making stuff fast enough and consistent for these batches. But if you wanna pay yourself, you have to have your price set and your efficiency really good. Otherwise, you won't be making money. That's why my first batches were such a low hourly rate, because after the final price was already not that high, and then after the retailers cut, I wasn't really making a whole lot. So had a lot of stuff to work on then. That's why batch work was the way I approached knife making, is because when I started, that's the only way I could see to make money at the time. Now things are a little bit different with my website. This year has been a lot slower compared to last year, so I have been doing more stuff. I have been doing some stuff with retailers again, but having some website sales where you're making way more on your product, we're making practically the full price besides the fees and stuff, that's really nice. I generally do this part before my straightening, right after the anneal, but I forgot to this time. I think that's just because I was thinking a lot about what I wanted to say during this video and not as much about my steps. But yeah, usually I do this first to profile them, get the close to the final profile. This is so I don't overheat them when I'm doing the final profile when they're hardened. And it also makes it easier to see the straightness when you have clean lines that are ground instead of forged texture on them. Another thing about efficiency, so this year being a slow year, that's a big reason I'm doing YouTube again. Because less of my products are selling, I want to spend more of my time making ways where I can increase my reach and potentially find a new market for my products, instead of putting more time into just making more stuff that's probably not gonna sell. Now, unless you posted some kind of viral reel and got really lucky and a huge following really early, visibility is probably one of the biggest issues you'll have to deal with to make money knife making. And there's a lot of ways to go about increasing your visibility. Working with retailers, working local markets, doing shows, nationally, internationally, there's tons of ways to do that. YouTube videos, Instagram Reels, just building your presence every way you can. That's a really big thing, because people want to know who you are, your consistency of your product, how long you've been making things, Like, you got to have information on your stuff out there in order for people to want to buy them, and people want to know you too. So get out there and meet people, do shows, post videos. There's a lot of ways to increase your visibility. I'm in a very fortunate position now because when I started, a lot of those makers I really looked up to and took inspiration from them, I can now call my friends, and I'm really proud of that. Now that the kiln's hot, I'm gonna get these in and let them come up to temperature, and then I'll get on to the quenching. While these soak, I'll probably go back to working on those paring knives a little bit, because these gotta be in the kiln for a few minutes. I'm letting them soak for 12. I gained most of my visibility through working with Knifeware and getting my hands into people around the world through them, through selling knives through them, and also through traveling around to different shows, Knife Show Austria, Blade Show Atlanta, meeting a lot of other makers, learning from other makers, and that really helped get my name out into the world. And of course, to make money knife making, you have to have a good product. I wouldn't bother on all the visibility stuff and getting your knives into people's hands if you don't have something that people will leave good reviews on and recommend to other people. Otherwise, you could get a bad name for yourself, and then it'll be way harder to start actually selling knives and making money. When I first started knife making full time, I started to set up a shop in my mom's garage. I got a workbench, I built a workbench, got a grinder, picked up a drill press and a bandsaw from Facebook Marketplace. For the first 6 months of doing that, I hardly sold anything. I just spent a lot of time working on my product and making a bunch of different designs of chef's knives, working with some local chefs, getting feedback from them and changing my design constantly. I ended up throwing so many knives into the bucket that just didn't make the cut, that I didn't think were good enough to finish. And after a long time, I eventually started making knives that I was really happy with and actually performed well. The temper's now finished, so I'll take these guys out of the oven, let them cool down, and I'll get back to work on those paring knife handles. Get those finished up. This day is taking me longer than it usually does because of all the filming and thinking of ideas and doing all the takes of me talking. So usually on a normal work day, I would get a little bit more done, but you can still get an idea of the efficiency of the batch work in today's video. Another nice thing for efficiency is just having an organized space so you can lay out the projects you're working on and be able to think about everything that you're doing. So here I have, these are my lower priority projects. Here's higher priority. This is just like whenever I can get to them, or some of them are projects I might not even finish. Cleaning up and organizing, those are things that I still definitely need to work on. I'm not the best at keeping everything tidy, but it does help with your speed when you're going through a batch work, when you know where everything is. You don't have to waste time looking for things, and everything's just in a good state. Keeps your mind clearer too. Just gotta check how these fit straight out of the burn-in. Then I gotta file and clean everything up so they fit nicely before I can go on to shaping the handles. Another huge benefit to doing batch work is you do the same thing so many times. Now, that could be a negative as it's boring, but when you grind a bunch of the same knives and make a bunch of the same knives, everything you do really sticks in your head because you're doing everything 4 times. So when you're learning how to make knives and you're really trying to improve your skills, I would say start off with doing one-off pieces if your forging still feels like it's not quite there. But once you start to feel like you're there, Doing batch work can really help refine your technique because you're doing the same thing a bunch of times, doing the same blades a bunch of times. So everything is really drilled into your head and you really remember how to do things and you get that muscle memory down. Like doing all the same grinds on your kitchen knives, all the same handles. Now, you don't have to do all the same for everything. I do wah handles on pretty much everything I make. I don't even remember the last time I made a round handle. It's good to switch it up sometimes. I'll probably try something else eventually. But it really helps, at least for the blade side of things. That helped me so much, is just making so many gyudos. That's what I really did. I've made hundreds of gyudos now. I don't even have a profile stencil for my gyudos, but because I make small adjustments batch to batch based on what improvements I think I can make. But I have a pretty consistent profile and you can usually tell when a knife is mine, even if you don't see the stamp, I think. Now these are done their rough grinding of the handles. Now take it to the 400 grit belt, get them all cleaned up and finish these up. Okay, now I have these all glued up. Handles finished, nicely polished. A few of these have some darker spots in this maple, which I'm not used to seeing, but they also have really cool bird's eye kind of pattern and chatoyance there. Now, these paring knives should be available on my website the same day that this video goes up. And these Nikiris should be available a few days to a week after the video goes up, depending on when I get them done. So those are a lot of ways you can improve your efficiency through batch work, and just a lot of my story and how I learned how to make knives and make money making knives and doing this full time. Now, this was a full day of work for me. I've been here for about 8 hours now. I did have a pretty long lunch break, but also this is a lot less work than I would usually do in the same amount of time because of the videoing. Like, a lot of the time was spent thinking of things to say and setting up the camera, doing retakes. I'm trying to do most of these in one take because I don't want to spend all day here and keep redoing videos. But yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like on the video and have a nice day, everyone.